Jesus Christ is a popular historical figure. That he was popular is widely agreed upon. But there are various other very important details about the life of Jesus Christ where plenty of disagreements come in. Hello and welcome. This is Operation Stevens, the Historical Jesus as God live webinar series, and I am Arul Velusamy. Over the next 4 weeks, I'd be talking to you about the various steps in which we can get to know finer details about the life of Jesus Christ. The historical Jesus on the cross. Of course, apart from the fact that Jesus was popular, Jesus being on the cross is another widely acknowledged historical fact. But there are plenty of other facts which need to be discussed. What really led Jesus to be on the cross? How did he make his enemies? What was his teaching prior to the fact of the cross? What was his following? What did people really think about him? The identity of Jesus, and so on, are various finer details that we really need to dig into for us to get some very important details about the life of Jesus Christ. And also, of course, some of the crucial elements of Jesus's life comes from after the time on the cross also. So I think this is going to be an exciting journey that we will take together in this 4-session live webinar series starting from next week. Firstly, of course, all of us might be familiar with the Holy Bible that we have today. But the question we really need to be asking is, how much of what we have today actually comes from the first century? Can we be confident of the content of, let's say, the English Bible that we have today to be a historical document? So this is really where we're going to be looking at this topic called Gospels as historical documents. In this, we are going to establish that what we have in the Holy Bible actually comes from the first century. This we are going to discuss on the 19th of September, 7:30 to 8:30 British Summer Time. Next, once we establish that we have the first century text in our current day Bible, the next thing that we ought to be thinking about is how much of what was recorded in the first century text actually corresponds to historical people, historical places, and historical events. That specific analysis would essentially lead us to concluding that what we have in the Holy Bible, which again comes from the first century text, isn't really a fantasy book, a fictional book, but rather a historical book. In other words, the idea here really would be to establish that the Gospels are documents of history. Please note, in the first session we'll be discussing that Gospels are historical documents. But in the second session and the third session, we would actually be looking at the fact that Gospels are documents of history. This, like I alluded to earlier, we would be doing over 2 sessions. I would actually be extremely happy to suggest that even by looking at the content of the Bible, a valid historical analysis could be conducted about the first century history. But the fact of the matter also is just to make sure that we can be doubly confident about our case. We also have extra biblical books which come from the first century, which actually talk about people, places, and events, some of which are shared with the content of the Bible. And that's precisely where we have the Bible and some of the other historical books that we can use to compare against each other for us to get a watertight case for the Bible. So, like I said, Gospels as documents of history will be over 2 sessions. The first one on the 26th of September and the second one on the 3rd of October, both between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m. BST. Right, Jesus on the cross. Like I said earlier, that's something everyone would be quick to agree upon, even at an initial glance. But the fact of the matter also is that over the next 3 weeks, we'd be going through the sessions for us to establish that the Bible is a reliable historical document, from where we can glean plenty of information, plenty of very fine details about the life of Jesus Christ. And that will take us to the 4th session. And the 4th session is essentially establishing that the historical Jesus is God. And this we would do on the 10th of October between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m. BSD. The exploration here mainly would be based on understanding the testimony from the Gospels. We of course get to know some details about both Jesus and his followers. Now we can use these details to see if some of the beliefs that were carried over by his followers over the centuries, beginning from the 1st century, are logically watertight. And that's precisely the kind of analysis which would help us come to the conclusion that Jesus, the historical Jesus, could be considered as God. Now with that 4th session, we'd be wrapping up this series. I'm quite excited to go through this series with you. The series has been prepared for essentially people who are not so knowledgeable about either Jesus or the Gospels or the other parts of the Bible. And therefore, if you think you haven't got a clue about Jesus, you're most welcome to join us at the times which I had already mentioned about, which we would reiterate towards the end. We'd be more than happy for you to join. There'd be plenty of time for you to ask critical questions, honest questions, which would help us to evaluate this case together, the historical Jesus. I am Arul Velusamy, and I'm quite glad to present this webinar series to you as part of Operation Stephen. Thank you, and God bless you.